Today we're working at the Essex Shipbuilding Museum, walking through the museum looking at the various shacks and guys working on boats, repair facilities, rigging, a unique environment to say the least. And on our approach we saw this view coming across a small bridge looking up a gully that at the time was kind of, the tide was out. Here in this picture the tide is in a little more. I'm doing the drawing. You can see that I'm paying attention on the contours primarily, how the edges of different shapes meet. I'm very conscious of how things are connected in terms of edges, and also how these edges form interesting shapes. And today's presentation basically is on the big shape. The big shape is a result of connecting shapes throughout the composition. I'm going to do this with, after doing the drawing, with yellow ochre. It can be done with any color, but I found that there's a lot of warm colors running through the scene, and as a foundational color this yellow ochre will help me to give a foundation of warmth to the future colors and at the same time illustrate this idea of a big connected shape, which gives the whole composition a measure of unity. And yes, we're looking at houses and boats and grass and reflections, but the artist looks at these as shapes, and if we can make them more interesting shapes, our composition is stronger. If we can find a way to connect these shapes, our composition is stronger. In this case, the scene is backlit. You see now how the shapes, this yellow ochre makes one big shape, and as a result, two negative shapes in the sky and water. I'm approaching these with a graded wash, starting with a bit of yellow ochre and dropping in some cobalt blue. This is one of the lighter areas in the painting. It's a graded wash which helps to create a feeling of a receding sky. I'm going to do the same thing into the water, putting a little more pink and ultramarine blue into the water, and it's going to be a darker value but very similar to the sky. I'm doing these two first so that after they dry I can set about creating the medium strong darks that unify this whole composition. I'm adding more blue, more alizarin crimson. You can see it as the wash goes down. As it dries it's going to be lighter, but at this stage you can clearly see how the graded wash is working to create a feeling of depth in the painting. So the first stage is dried. I'm returning with a mixture of cad yellow and viridian and cobalt blue. The top edge, the edge that faces the sky, is still wet, so notice how I'm getting some soft edges to my trees. This helps to create a feeling of distance and also gives a feeling of humidity or wet air, which we definitely felt when we were working at this location. I'm cutting around some shapes. These shapes, as the background starts to materialize, it's pretty recognizable as rooftops or wharfs or boats. They're simply white shapes, and I'm not going to touch them after this. I'm going to add maybe some more darks into the sides or facings of different buildings, but these whites, this pattern of white, is not going to change. I've added to that green that I started with a bit more cad yellow. This little bar here is closer to us, has some of that bright green because of the sun striking down on it, and adding this few darks and a few touches of that cad yellow light is going to help this area to come closer to us. But still, look how they're unified, how they connect. Into the rooftop of a distant working shack where a fellow is repairing his boat. The shack is backlit, so this whole side that I'm painting is quite dark with burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. Again, I'm taking an attack of leaving some whites, some important whites on the top surfaces of the boats, on the top surface of some of the grass. So the strokes that I'm making are measured, and at the same time they're joining the strong midtones that I'm painting now. While this paint is wet, it's an opportunity to add a little splash of color. It was a red boat in shadow, so it's not a bright red, but that red was definitely felt as we were looking at the scene. And as I carry it down into the shadow that's cast by the boat, which is falling on the grass, and helping to define this near dory that's washed up on the side. It's got a really beautiful angle. Everyone that was painting this was struck by that dory, and it develops as a center of interest. You see I'm extending this a like tone, very much similar to what's behind it, leaving an edge, a white edge on that dory so that it shows the sun is coming straight down, also separates the tone just enough to give us a feeling of a new object or a closer object. While it's wet, it's an opportunity. You know, we can add some of the painted striping that's on the boat. We can add some of the timbers that we see. We can add any lettering that we want to. We can use this dark also to define the ragged edge of grass that's underneath.